Hello and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the Halloween event rerun. There are 39 units in the REM and 2 machines you can roll in. One machine is 1 magic stone more expensive and it excludes the 5-star units. The seasonal is one that comes very soon after their JP debut, so NA gets an early taste of JP's current power creep levels. But as it is with most seasonals, it's rare that units from these REMs actually stand out. There is one obvious unit that has remained relevant for the last year. Well, at least they're equipped, that unit being Paimon. Last year, I didn't make a review video for this REM, but I definitely thought it was worth it since I rolled a bunch until I got 2 copies of Halloween Paimon, and I have no regrets. If you were in the same situation as me, I don't think rolling in this rerun will have as much value as it did last year. On the other hand, if you never roll in Halloween, it might be very tempting to chase Paimon, but keep in mind of what's to come in the next 2 months, as you might want to save your stone. As always, I'll expand more on these upcoming events at the end of the video, but for now, let me take a look at some of the Halloween units, starting with the Black Metal Exchange, Linthia. She is very similar to the recent Pat Island Black Metal unit, Kyori. As it was with him, she requires a lot of farming for special gems and 5 black metals as straight fodder. But as it was with Kyori, I would feel comfortable skipping the grind. I did actually bother to farm a few copies of her last year, but I've never actually used her. Don't get me wrong, she is a strong rainbow unit that can clear awoken binds on a 3-turn cooldown and also generate a rainbow board. But neither of these things are all that impressive seeing where rainbow teams stand with Gino. She might not be that bad if you expect to face a lot of awoken binds in a dungeon, but otherwise, I think you're better off running someone else that brings more utility or damage. Her equip could be decent for its OEs and 5-color awakening, but equips with multiple OEs have become more common nowadays, and these don't come with a negative skill boost. A prime example being Ramir's equip. Now, as for most of the Halloween REM units, I will be actually skipping a lot of them, as I don't see much value and I generally consider them to be trade fodder for the new 10-star exchangeable units. Maybe you think some of the ones that I skip have actual uses, so if I don't mention the units here and you disagree, please let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe. Okay, now onto the REM units. Zarok doesn't have much use as a base, but his equip adds a lot of bulk and some utility, and even though the active skill is not that useful, you could keep it at level 1 so as to never overcharge it. Sonia has some value for ranking dungeons as a base and as an equip. I would try to keep any and all copies, even though for ranking dungeons, her random orb distribution is falling out of favor since we're seeing fixed board active skills pop up more and more, and these are obviously better for ranking dungeons. Durga and Inahime are old orb skin units, but you can't purchase them anymore, and honestly I don't see why you would want to. Durga does have a bit more value for being a looping shield and looping auto healer in rainbow teams thanks to her skill charge Super Awakening. Unfortunately, choosing that Super Awakening means she won't be doing much damage as her base awakenings don't do much. Cotton and Elia are exchangeable for 4 6-star GFEs, but I don't currently see the value of either. Cotton brings a taste of crazy cap breaks to come, but her active skill cooldown is a bit too long. Sure, it could enable a unit to deal up to 60 billion damage, but I don't think that's something with much upside at the moment. I would rather wait for other units with crazy cap rates, like Gojo from JJK or Omnimon from Digimon. Plus, you might already have a copy or 2 of her since she has been exchangeable for years now. Amakozumi is a decent Dark Orb changer, but a bit unreliable since his active skill depends on which orbs are on your board, and since Dark has no shortage of board changers, I don't see much that makes this unit stand out. If you have no one else better, Amako is not a bad option, and if you run 2 in a team, you'll have the damage absorption role covered. Weld also has a significantly high damage cap break, but as a unit, they are limited to non-super gravity dungeons since they can only have at most 2 break awakenings, and unfortunately, that's not a lot of damage. Their active skill is also on a really high cooldown, so for most dungeons, you won't be able to use their active skill more than once. Beelzebub and Shipnia were decent for buttoning and farming, but unfortunately, they were made slightly worse since they now have a cap breaking effect in their active skill. It's not a big deal, but I'm sure some people are annoyed that the active skill is now slightly slower. Bastet doesn't stand out as a unit, but at least she has a decent 7C plus equip. Gonho even considers it to be strong since this equip didn't receive any buffs. Shironaki is a decent cleric with 2 interesting equips that have 2 killer awakenings. As a cleric, it's hard for me to not immediately compare her to Kohaku, but if you have an answer to HP debuffs, Shironaki is not a bad option as a utility-focused cleric. Suou is a 9-star exchangeable unit that might be useful on ranking dungeons with his 5-turn active skill charge, and that's pretty much all the base form is used for. Though nowadays, we have one other 5-turn charge and a bunch of 4-turn charges that might be more than enough depending on the ranking dungeon. Suou has the benefit of having a 20-turn cooldown, so at least he has that going on since 5-turn charge equips have a 30-turn cooldown, and 4-turn charges usually have a 24-turn cooldown. Though post-transformation, his active skill can be deadly, as 2 turns of skill bind might not let you activate your leader skill damage reduction. The 75% damage reduction shield might not be enough to tank any hits, unless your leader gives you a very high raw HP boost. His first equip has the same self-skill binding issue, but it does give a long-lasting absorption voiding effect. The second equip is not as unique, but it gives a decent amount of utility. Suou's Woodibo is a big rainbow damage stick, but outside of that, he doesn't offer much with his loopable spike active skill. The cap break does allow him to deal up to 21 billion damage every turn, but I wish his awakenings had been condensed and he had been given more useful awakenings, like at least a Pine Resist in his base awakening, since most of the time you will want to choose the 5-color super awakening, and if you do, you will have to stress about finding an equip with the Pine Resist. His Wood equip gives a decent damage boost to rainbow units, and it also gives a bit of utility, but the active skill is the same as the Wood form, which probably won't be of much use. It could at least counter significant attack debuffs like the one that happens on the 4th floor of SN1, but these type of debuffs in newer dungeons are usually stallable, so they're not that big of a deal. Overall, I wouldn't stress about exchanging for Suou, as I don't see much use for any of his forms. If you're interested in ranking dungeons and have a lot of trade fodder, you might want to get a copy. I don't really keep a close eye about the top performing teams in ranking dungeons, but I don't think Suou has been all that relevant as of late. Shuri is a new mid-rarity unit that offers a lot of utility, but that's about it. She can be a decent RCB stick, help recover SS, or bring in some bulk with the stat boost super awakening, but her active skill pretty much does nothing. The unlock and heal generation on a 1-turn cooldown seems interesting, but by today's standards, it looks pretty useless. There seems to be a trend of strong 1-turn orb spawners being released lately, so there might come a time where a 1-turn cooldown unlocker might be needed, but that time is not now. In JP, this unit was shortly released after Sukuna from JJK, and I assume Shuri was made with him in mind, but as far as I can tell, Shuri hasn't proven to be useful in Sukuna teams or any other teams. As a matter of fact, if the game ever moves away from 2 to 4 unit systems that remove locks and generate almost perfect boards, then maybe we'll see the need for 1-turn cooldown unlockers. Her equip also shines in utility, but has a slightly more useful active skill that can at least help tackle HP debuffs. The 2 Hilois, Fua, and Super Fua awakenings could definitely help a recovery stick heal even more, and those last 2 awakenings can help deal with large enemy shields, or maybe help cover those 2 awakenings in a ranking dungeon. I still find this unit overall to be very underwhelming, but if you manage to get Shuri, I would try to keep at least 1 copy in case the equip ever proves to be useful. Madoo is an exchangeable 9-star unit that might be worth taking a look at, though I would most likely skip when push comes to shove. Her base form won't be doing that much damage without a levitate equip, and without matching a hard L and a PDP. At the very least, she could be a decent source of skill boost and can help recover assists, though only a single level L might not cut it nowadays. Madoo's active skill is one of the few that are able to tackle combo shields, so she's got that going for her, even though I don't think at the moment this is a mechanic that deserves a dedicated team slot. Her Evo plays the assist recovery role much better, but she still doesn't deal that much damage. This unit's active skill might not be that bad, especially for newer dungeons that require large damage reduction shields. A 50% damage reduction shield should be big enough, and the pierce and damage absorption void effects are a decent added bonus that could come in pretty handy, so only her Evo looks somewhat useful. And even if you don't have a deep box, you might have other shield units that work well enough and don't require you to exchange 7-star GFE fodder. Molorum is another new mid-rarity unit and the first in NA to have 2 aging awakenings. After floor 10, in a moon dungeon, she will have over 41k HP. Her damage will also be very significant in green BDP teams after floor 10, but unfortunately, she doesn't have a home at the moment, as it is typical with green units. In JP, there is currently 1 wood team that is considered strong, and I don't really see this unit being used all that much. That team depends on other orb changers, as Melorum's active skill cooldown is a little too long to be dependent on. Her other active skill effects don't bring much to the table table. Her looping cap break effect would help a lot if Molorum had a third wood attribute, so at least there'd be more of a reason to run this unit as a damage and HP stick. The active skills bonus combos aren't too significant either. They are a nice addition, but I don't think they'll be that consequential most of the time. And while the shield break effect might save you a lot of time in newer dungeons where enemies put up big shields, the 6-turn cooldown is again a bit on the long side. Her equip does have some utility and team HP awakenings, but other than that, this equip doesn't offer that much either. Elfride is a new orb skin unit that has the first looping pierce active skill. Unfortunately, I don't see her being all that strong at the moment or in the foreseeable future. Pierce active skills are mostly unnecessary in the strongest teams at the moment. Generally, teams either match boxes or run pierce latents, or in the rare instances that they have someone with a pierce effect, that's not usually all they do, like in the case of the new craze in JP, Paimon, who in addition to piercing does a bunch of other crazy things. Halloween Elfride's pre-transformation active skill doesn't give any effective skill boosts, and post-transformation, her active skill only raises her damage cap to 5 billion and gives a random fire, dark, and heal board, which might not give enough orbs to match multiple dark roads, assuming these will be your primary goal. Her leader skill scales with each dark or fire match, so you don't necessarily need to match rows, but the goal of this unit is to push rows as a viable playstyle. She kinda solves the issue that you often face with row teams, not like they've been relevant as of late, but if you want to deal with damage void shields, you usually have to stall a lot waiting for your peers to come back up if they are often needed throughout a dungeon. The other option would be to match a box, but for a lot of teams, it'll be hard to guarantee the 15 orbs needed to match at least a box and a row. So now with 100% pierce uptime, you could go back to the good old days of dark and fire row matching. Sucks about her awakenings though, as those 10 Cs could have been obviously condensed and she could have space for 3 other awakenings. Maybe when she gets buffed next year, but for now, her base form is very underwhelming, even when taking into account her unique active skill. Elfride's equip has more general uses. 10 C, a skill boost, and Dark Sub-attribute awakenings are obviously great on their own. The active skill might not seem all that useful, but could play an important role in certain situations. For example, this could have been great in some Geno SN3 speedrunning teams. If used on floor 1, the absorption void effect would last until floor 3, where you need 2 turns of this effect, and the auto heal effect would let you ignore healing if you didn't bother clearing the heal unmatchable debuff that happens on the first floor. Goten's equip was much more preferable for this and a lot more other SN3 teams because of its haste and the pierce effect that might be needed on floor 1, but Elfride's equip might have some other very niche situation where it might be preferable. Outside of these rare scenarios, the equip is not too bad. It also has some future potential if rows do make a big comeback as a viable playstyle. But again, in general, the awakenings alone are pretty solid. Still, a $20 bet on this equip becoming useful in the future is a bit too high in my opinion, so I wouldn't consider getting this bundle unless you have high hopes. Chakeol got a very interesting buff to her active skill that turns her into a looping shield and cleric, very similar to Gupta from Slime, though Chakeol is more damage oriented. Both have the same cooldown, which is a bit high for a cleric effect, since more commonly you want this to be on around a 5-turn cooldown. Her equips are somewhat solid, but didn't get any meaningful buffs to stand apart in today's meta. Same goes for her Fire Evo. Even though this form has a higher damage multiplier, Fire Cross teams are not a thing at the moment. Even as a one-off in a non-cross team, she won't be bringing much to the table, as pretty much every meta leader self-attack buffs and breaks their own damage cap. And the unmatchable recovery effect will be covered by a dedicated cleric. Seeing how SN3 and SN4 boost certain monster types, maybe her fire equip will be useful if a dungeon ever boosts Devil. That's a bit of a long shot though. Ultimately, I would rather save some 7-star GFE trade fodder or other upcoming trades from Monster Hunter. Nelle is a BGM card that got a pretty strong buff. She has a high damage multiplier and a strong active skill, but the self-tape debuff might be a total deal breaker as you might be unable to activate your leader skill damage reduction with the tape on the board. The active skill's other effects are strong since they void absorptions and break her own damage cap to 13 billion on a very low cooldown. But again, the tape might be a run ender if you're unlucky. Her first equip adds a lot of bulk, Dark Sub-attribute, and gives 2 different killers. These awakenings will soon get buffed to raise a unit's cap to 2x from 1.2, so killers on transforming units will give them a very significant damage boost, especially if those units are unable to raise their own damage caps. For this equip specifically, healer and physical killer awakenings might not be applicable for most floors of a dungeon. The equip's active skill is maybe not as useful too, as again, the 2-turn tape might prove to be deadly. The Lollipop equip is a decent 10C equip that got the new Power Break Awakening. Be aware that this equip can be easily overcharged, but that might be a good thing if you only need the Absorption Void effect once or twice, and if you can easily overcharge a unit. The Power Break Awakening won't be as useful for a while. Honestly, I don't see much value for this in the foreseeable future, but for what it's worth, this is one of 3 Power Break equips at the moment with a 10C Awakening, so the value for this equip might rise in the future, especially if the Power Break Awakening gets buffed to be something more than a glorified Dungeon Boost Awakening. Nelle's Evo is unfortunately not as useful as the base form, even considering the fact that she doesn't give up pesky tape. Her active skill doesn't really shine unless you have a way to void attribute absorption, since you usually have a unit with an active skill that takes care of these 2 absorption shields at the same time. Her other effects are more niche, and her taking a whole team slot for these effects does not provide much upside. It doesn't help that her damage is somewhat lacking unless you match more than 14 combos and a BDP. Since pretty much all of her forms are not that groundbreaking, I would feel comfortable skipping her bundle. She's not completely useless, but definitely not worth $30. Nobunaga Nohime is a new unit that is exchangeable for 14 Halloween units, and it's the first one with a looping 40% shield and cleric active skill. As with Chakeol, Nobunaga Nohime is a damage-oriented version of Gopta that is exchangeable, but on top of that, their active skill is 1 turn shorter than those other 2. At 6 turn cooldown, it's still on the long side for a cleric active skill, so properly timing your skills will be key if you want to condense 2 common team slots into 1 unit. They don't offer any utility as almost all of their awakenings are damage oriented. Because of this, I'm not a huge fan of the unit, since usually for a cleric, I want them to bring more utility. Those 7C and raw awakenings look weak, but again, these will soon be buffed. If you make 14 combos and stack rows, Nobunaga Nohime won't have an issue dealing a lot of damage. One of the best Dark Row leaders will be Sukuna, which will probably arrive in NA in early December with the JJK collab rerun. But even these row-centric teams do not seem to use this unit. Sukuna is one of the fastest SN4 farming leads, and his teams use large shields or gravities to tank or avoid large hits, so they don't really need a looping shield unit like this one. Maybe it's not that fair to grade Nobunaga Nohime's value according to their usage in SN4, as generally in other dungeons, Nobunaga Nohime might be the looping shield of choice. Their time to shine is not now. Maybe it'll be in the future, or maybe not, as Gonho might release a much better 40% looping shield unit. Nobunaga Nohime's equip is decent for SN4, since this dungeon boosts cat type units HP, and the add devil type awakening might be useful in the future if SN5 or 6 were to boost devil type HP, but that's not a guarantee. The equip doesn't offer any effective skill boost, but 80% damage reduction for 2 turns might be a large enough shield to help stall at the start of a dungeon, and serve as a 2 time-consuming pseudo skill boost. I still don't see much value for this unit at the moment, or in the very near future, but the novelty of its active skill is somewhat tempting. I would only exchange for a copy if you're swimming in trade fodder, and after taking a close look at Hera. Kyori is the Orpskin unit introduced last year, and the base form unfortunately didn't get a good buff. He got a 3-row awakening instead of something more useful like another double L. Yes, he is able to do a lot of damage with his new damage awakening, but I wish his buff had focused more in the utility department. Again, row seemed a bit weird right now, but row awakenings will be somewhat relevant when we get JJK. But as it was with Nobunaga Nohime, Kyori won't really see much use as a looping shield for those upcoming teams. Most of Kyori's value comes from his 10C equip that got a great buff, as it is on par with Misaka's if you focus on its bulk and effective skill boost. The Cloud and Takoyaki Awakening, which will soon get buffed, are an added bonus, and therefore in some cases, this equip might be better than Misaka's, depending on the team. The second equip is much less useful. There might be places where you could use the shield and attribute Absorption Void, though I doubt it's worth the effort of including this in a team. Again, the killers will soon double a unit's damage cap break when applicable, but even after that, I don't see much value in this second equip. His first equip will definitely see a lot of use. Even then, if you don't have a copy, I do think $20 is a lot for only an equip, but that choice is up to you. Maybe you like the fact that you can buy this equip and skip the REM, and if you're in that camp, this bundle is probably the one that has more bang for your buck. Hera is the new batch unit, meaning she's purchasable for $30 or exchangeable for any 20 Halloween units. She has decent utility and a respectable damage multiplier, but to do meaningful damage in newer endgame dungeons, she'll need a levitate equip, and you'll definitely want that to fully take advantage of her active skill's crazy 40 billion damage cap rate. Her whole active skill is interesting, but has limited uses, and having a restriction doesn't really help. She could see some use in SN4 with Sukuna farming teams. Both of her equips add cat type, which makes them somewhat relevant for SN4, though the active skills are not that useful. The Suou's equip sees more use than the lollipop, especially in SN4 on those Sukuna teams, so if you have plans to farm SN4, I would consider getting at least one Hera. Definitely skip the bundle though. Paimon is the holy grail of the collab, as his equip has remained one of the best ones ever since its introduction last year. The equip didn't get any active skill or awakening buffs, mainly because none of its awakenings can be condensed or upgraded, and even then, the equip remains really good. The base form did get some buffs and can deal a decent amount of damage in moon dungeons. His active skill is not bad for what it does, but it could shine in a team with 3 other units that have a 7-turn cooldown Ace active skill. That team comp is always an option, but not too popular. But again, Paimon's main usage will be as an equip. Unfortunately, the only way to obtain him this time around is to roll him, since he is a mid rarity. A few months ago, Gung-Ho had a $20 Paimon bundle, but for this event, they chose not to have it for sale. So Halloween does have some interesting and unique units, but at the end of the day, unique doesn't always translate as good or long-lasting, like in the case of Elfride, since I am very skeptical about the future usage of this unit. Paimon's equip is still one of the best out there, so to those without this unit, it might be very tempting to roll, but I would still try not to spend too many stones here. For those who have a lot of trade fodder, I would consider taking a look at Hera and maybe Nobunaga and Nohime. Hera sees some use in Sukuna SN4 farming teams, both as a base and as an equip. I haven't seen Nobunaga and Nohime use all that much, but if you have leftover fodder, I would maybe trade for a copy, just in case. Kyori, Nelle, and Elfride are bundle units, so if any of them look useful to you, you could skip the REM and outright purchase them. I don't really think they're worth the money, because for these 3 units, I only find their Sensi equip to have some lasting value, with Kyori's equip being the strongest out of the 3. There are other exchangeable units, but I would save my fodder, especially 7-star GFEs, since those could be better used in Monster Hunter to exchange for Namiel or other dark units that enable farming of some of the SN and UN dungeons. Speaking of, we should be seeing the Monster Hunter rerun somewhat soon, but I would try to do very minimal to no rolling there. Sanrio should follow it, and this collab mainly only brings Goten Babatsmaru, which has stuck around, but only for farming purposes. This unit is exchangeable for 6-star and above Sanrio units, so if you don't have enough Sanrio fodder, you might actually want to do some rolling here, especially if you have those 2 dark Monster Hunter units I showed. Then we should see a JJK rerun, and again, this collab has Sukuna, who is great for farming SN4 and other in-game dungeons. His teams sometimes use those previously mentioned Monster Hunter and Sanrio units, but if you only care about SN4, it seems JP has settled on this farming team that doesn't use any of those other collab units. And finally, Digimon brings Omnimon, who is considered to be on par with Geno by some JP tier lists. Omnimon is exchangeable for 14 Digimon units, meaning if you want to get a copy, you could just roll for fodder with about 100 stones. You do ideally want 3 copies of this unit and a copy of Joe, who's a mid-rarity unit, to build the usual Omnimon team. So in the worst case scenario, you might want to roll a lot in Digimon to at least get 1 Joe and enough fodder for at least 2 Omnimon. There's also the 12 Magic Stone Super Gathfest that we might see sometime in December. This Super Gathfest is great if you want to get Circlia or Arcbursa, since those units will appear at 5% rates. At the very least, that machine only has GFEs, so you could use it to stock up on trade fodder. It's still up in the air whether NA will get Digimon, but even if we don't, I think the best move is to keep saving stones, and if it doesn't seem likely that we'll get that new collab, then maybe it might not be a bad idea to keep rolling in JJK. I do feel that JJK and Digimon don't really offer that much outside of Sukuna and Omnimon teams, but there isn't really anything else that's more exciting down the line. I actually did a Digimon tier list on my Twitch if you want to check it out. Some of my thoughts have changed since I've seen some of these units in play, but generally, I think my assessment of these units hasn't been that far off. Hopefully NA does get the collab, and I'll have a shorter, more structured video when hopefully that happens. Alright, that does it for this video. Let me know about your plans for this event or for future REMs. I would love to hear your thoughts. I am hoping Copium and hoping Digimon comes to an A, so I'll mainly be saving for that REM, even though that machine has pretty bad dupe value outside of Omnimon and Tai, and also the rate for low rarity units is pretty high. Alright, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.